Before I begin saying anything, I just need to point out how surreal this is, because last year's Women's Storytelling Festival was not only the first Women's Storytelling Festival I've ever been to, it was the first storytelling festival I'd ever been to. And talk about a bar. I left there feeling connected and seen and free. So I didn't grow up with a whole lot of agency as a kid, but there's one thing that I was allowed to do. Every summer, I was free to go out and ride. And although my first bike was a hand-me-down, she was all mine. Blue metallic body, long mustache handlebars, and I was able to pick out this badass white banana seat with red and purple and yellow flowers. And on the ends of the handlebars, I also got to pick out these glittery streamers that went as I cruised around town. I was about 8 or 9. And my favorite place to ride that bike was to the summer playground, but I had to go up this huge hill to get there. So my legs, always considered too big, too thick, too chunky, would pump away up this hill. And at the beginning of the summer, I would have to get off my bike and walk it to get to the top of the hill. But by the end of the summer, I could make it all the way to the top without getting off. Yes. And yeah, I made that trip to go to the summer playground with the rec department, but also because there was nothing, and I mean nothing, like screaming down that hill on the way home. The wind in my face, my hair flying all over. I just felt alive and free and like I was flying. So between 8th grade and freshman year, I was gifted my own very first ladies Schwinn 10-speed. Red, you know, the kind with the curly handlebars and the handbrakes and the skinny tires, and I rode that thing all over town. And at the end of the summer, I rode it to and from my tennis practices. And one day when I was riding home from practice, I had all of my gear and a teammate's gear on my handlebars. And as I was going home for the lunch break, I noticed that along my usual route, the bridge was full of people and I wasn't going to be able to use it. So I decided that I would just ride on the grass alongside of it. But eventually I noticed that the grass was going to run out and I was going to go over a cliff with my bike if I didn't stop and course correct. So I reached for my brakes, but all I got was a handful of tennis rackets and sweatshirts, and I couldn't stop. My bike and I sailed over the cliff and into a culvert where we were tossed, I was tossed face first into a stone wall. It was like that slow motion, like you see in the movies. I don't remember feeling any pain when my mouth hit the wall, just like a cold, hard impact. The next thing I knew, I was sitting up on top of that fieldstone wall while like half a dozen people looked for my teeth in the bottom of the culvert. What we didn't realize at the time was that they were embedded in the roof of my mouth. I tried to ride a bike again. Maybe, I don't know, half a dozen times over the years. But inevitably, the same feeling of panic would rush over me. I would seize up and be paralyzed, and I would have to get off. And the story that I told myself about that was that, you know, I had had this crazy traumatic accident when I was 14, and I just wasn't going to be able to ride a bike, right? Some people could. I just couldn't. And then in 2018, I started dating my husband. So Jeff is a psychotherapist by trade, and he used to work with adolescents doing wilderness therapy outside in the dead of winter in Wisconsin. The guy knew how to survive. And being with him just made me feel safe. So another thing happened when we first started dating, and that is that he did a 50-mile ride in our area called Bike to the Beat. And it's this really cool event that combines music and biking. And I was so envious, and something inside of me wanted to try again. So we went to a bike store, a local bike store, where you can actually pick out a bike and then go right out onto a path and test drive it. And I just felt like, yeah, maybe I can do this. So I tried out maybe 3 or 4 of them that afternoon. And yeah, I had some panic moments where I had to stop and pull off the path and then start up again. But I was on a mission. Like, I was resolute. And Jeff was right there cheering me on. So I picked out a bike. I found one that I loved. And if there's any bike geeks watching, she is a black Liv Row 3 with teal details. So another thing happened that day. I decided that I was also going to commit to doing my own 50-mile Bike to the Beat ride. 0 to 90 is the way I generally approach things. So that's what I decided to do. So one Sunday morning, I was up training really early in the morning, like before the rest of the town was up. And so all of the roads were clear. I had sidewalks to myself. I was riding like this. I was singing along to like Shawn Mendes and Camila Cabello. I love it when you call me señorita. I was just having a blast. I had reclaimed the joy of my bike. Then up ahead, I noticed maybe like 3 or 4 blocks, there was a van coming perpendicular to the direction that I was driving in. And I thought it was kind of weird, like 6 o'clock in the morning. I hadn't seen another vehicle on the street, but I didn't think too much of it. And as I got closer, I noticed that it wasn't just a van, it was a sketchy van. Like the kind of van that would be next to the words sketchy van in the dictionary, right? Like long body, no windows, huge double doors in the back for easy access. And well, we've been taught what to do when we see a van like that, right? We go in the opposite direction. So I turned around, I started going in the opposite direction, and there was a panic that came over me. First, I was riding slowly, and then it was like that thing when I was little and I would be going up the basement stairs, just calmly, collected. And then all of a sudden, I would realize that a monster was about to grab one of my ankles and I would have to run as fast as I could. That's what happened with the bike. I suddenly thought about the van that might be behind me and I started going faster, and that's when it happened. That same moment of panic that used to come over me came over me again. And instead of riding my path, I went flying into a curb where my bike stopped and my body kept going. I slammed hard into the ground with my upper body, my bottom half of my body hit my bike. And I just had to lay there for a second because I had the wind knocked out of me and I didn't know if I was okay. The van had since disappeared, but as I started to pick up my bike, I began to sob and sob because I love my bike. And my carefree days with a bike were obviously over. It was obviously done. Biking just wasn't for me, and here's the proof. And then that little voice from when I was a little kid came back, the one that says, you know, if you fall off the horse, you have to get back on. So I got back on and I started riding, and now I was listening to Taylor Swift, You Need to Calm Down. And I was riding and my tears of sadness and despair turned to tears of rage. And I felt like nobody, and I mean nobody, was going to take my freedom and my bike away from me now that I had found it. That carefree bliss That was mine. So I had to take like 2 weeks off to mend some broken ribs and a really banged up knee. But I got back at it. I decided that I wanted to keep training. And I found a hill to train on. And when I first started, I had to walk my bike to get to the top of that hill. But after a while, I could make it all the way to the top on my own power, grateful for these big old muscular legs. And as I was flying down the other side, I knew a new freedom and a new happiness because biking was forever mine. And yeah, the injury did keep me from completing a 50-mile ride that summer. But we did do a 30. And as I was crossing the finish line, I felt that new freedom and that new happiness. And I knew I could fly. Thank you.